Hello, Patriots. Welcome to Doug's Democracy Den. Here in the Den, we like to talk about American government, American politics, and current events. On every visit to the Den, we will pay tribute to the flag and the nation by reciting the Pledge of Allegiance. Please feel free to join in. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Today in the Den, we're going to look at the presidential election cycle and include in it a second part of the Electoral College. In a presidential election year, there's a specific calendar which plays out. It's very predictable, and although the news media tries to hype certain parts of it and make some things odd, there's nothing odd. Let's go through it. In January through June of every presidential election cycle, we have something called the primary season. What is that? What are these things called primaries? Well, they're a series of state-by-state elections. Why are they necessary? Here's why they're necessary. We have two major political parties, the Democrats and the Republicans. In each of those parties, there are many people who want to run for president. But each party can only have one person for president on the ballot in November. So the Democrats and Republicans had to come up with a system to narrow that down from all those people who want to be president to the one person who will be on the ballot in November. And so what they did was devise a system which we now call the primary system. They said, hey, we're going to have a series of elections going through all 50 states and make these people go through all these elections. And at the end of that point, we'll know who the most popular person is in our party to be on the ballot in November. That's the whole point of the primary system. Now, after the primary system is done, and they figured out who the most popular person in their party is, they'll have a national convention in July and August to verify it and make it official. And that person verified at the convention goes on the November ballot. Now, what I have just pointed out, the whole primary process and the conventions, there's nothing in the Constitution about them. Those were all made up by the parties to do things that they needed to have done. There's nothing in the Constitution about the primary system. It's totally made up by Democrats and Republicans. They make the rules. They can change the rules whenever they want. That's in the primaries. Now let's go to the November election. The November election is determined by your Constitution. Democrats and Republicans have nothing to say about it. November sets the presidential election. The Constitution does. And so the person who, from each party, won the primaries is on the ballot in November when you go to vote. After that vote is done on that day, then the excitement really starts. The constitutional process really starts. People assume you go hit election day and then it's over. Presidential election's over. The constitutional part of the presidential election is really just beginning. Here's why. When you vote for that person on that November ballot, you're not just voting for the person. You're voting for the list of electors which were chosen by his party or her party to represent them in the Electoral College. How does that work? In the month before the election's in November, in October, in every state, the Democrat Party in that state will tell the state Secretary of State who their electors will be if their Democrat candidate wins the presidential election in that state, and likewise Republicans. So in every state, the Secretary of State will have two lists of electors, one provided by the Democrat Party, one provided by the Republican Party. And then if the Democrat wins that state, the Secretary of State says the Democrat list is the official list of electors. If the Republican wins that state, Secretary of State says the Republican list is the official list of electors. How are these people chosen? They were chosen by the party. because the party wants their person to win. They said, if our person wins the vote in the state, these are the list of people we want to represent our guy or girl in the Electoral College. So when you vote for the presidential candidate, you are voting for the list of electors that they have chosen to represent them. That's how those electors are chosen. They are actual people. If you're in a state where there are 10 electoral votes, the Democrats and Republicans are each going to have a list of 10 actual people from that state. And those 10 actual people will be the electoral voters for that state. Trivia question. The Electoral College isn't just one place, but it does meet at one specific time. The Electoral College meets at one specific time as mandated by the Constitution. What is that time? We'll tell you at the end. So on November election night, you have voted for the person you want. And in your state, if they win your state, their party has already selected a list of, if you have 10 electoral votes, 10 people who are going to represent them in the Electoral College. So November, you think the presidential election is over? The constitutional part is just beginning. You've chosen your person. They have chosen their electoral voters. Now we move to December. The Electoral College meets in December. This is the constitutional part of the presidential election, the continuation of it. Where do they meet in December? They meet in every state capital. The Electoral College does not meet one big meeting somewhere in Washington. In each state, the electors who were chosen in the November election come to the state capitol in December, and they cast their electoral votes. Those electoral votes are then counted, and to make sure that the Secretary of State verifies that the proper people were there and they cast a proper vote. They don't care about who they vote for as long as it's an official vote. Then they seal them up and send them to Washington. Wait a minute. When did the electoral votes get counted? Well, that happened in December. In January, you have a new Congress coming in. A new Congress normally meets about January 6th. When they get there, it's their job to count the electoral votes. It is done on the floor of the U.S. House of Representatives, right out in the open. The count is done in the open. People televise it. PBS televises it. Everybody televises it. And they openly count the electoral votes. And then on that date, only on that date, is the winner of the presidential election official. On that day in January when the electoral votes are counted. Not on that night in November when you voted, because the constitutional process has to play out. Now, when does this Electoral College thing meet? Here is how it is specified in the Constitution. It is not given an exact date. Here's what it says. The Electoral College will meet on the first Monday after the second Wednesday in December. Let me repeat that. The Electoral College meets on the first Monday after the second Wednesday in December. So when you hear rumors about there will be never-ending counting, and it'll take forever to count votes and have an official outcome, the Constitution says that's not true. The Constitution says that the Electoral College votes must be cast on that day in December, which I just specified. Which means what? Which means all the states have to have all their counting and voting done before that date in December. So it will not drag on and on forever. Thanks for visiting then. See you next time.